All right. Every time I sit down to do this, I always say I don't really know what I'm going to talk about. Why is starting so hard?
I don't know. I think you'd be used to it by now.
It's always the start that's hard, and then like when I get going, then it's okay. But it's always the start. Okay.
Ready?
No. I'm never ready for this. Hi everyone and welcome back. Actually, welcome back to our brand new YouTube channel called Psykhe. And the reason why we decided to do this was because, well, Elaine also wants to cover Evangelion. I almost said Eva Longoria.
Eva Longoria.
Hi everyone and welcome back. Actually, welcome back to our brand new YouTube channel, Psykhe. And we decided to start this brand new channel because we are going to cover other media, namely Evangelion. So we will start doing some Evangelion work as well. So welcome back. And thank you for resubscribing to the new channel. I know it could be a little bit of a pain, but thank you for your loyalty and being interested. That means a lot because I don't really know how my content is received. So that's pretty nice. So thank you for that. So today we are covering Babylon 5, episode 12, Survivors.
Is it 12?
Is it not? So today we're going to be covering episode 11, Survivors. I can't with myself.
It's okay. I know it's hard to keep track of all the episodes you've done.
Yeah, because there's so many already so far. Okay, look, this is a record. So for me, it's a record.
It is.
All right, Survivors. So at first, I want to say that I didn't really feel like this episode spoke to me. And then once again, Elaine reminded me of what this project is really about, because it's really kind of hard to stay in touch with yourself constantly and be able to connect that to yourself. I still find that a struggle. You know, when I'm looking at other people's personal lives, that's a lot easier. But when you start looking at yourself and you're doing all that introspection with yourself, it's really hard to connect those dots, which is why then, you know, people do need other people to help them, guide them through, which is why therapy is essential and why it has a place. So, with that said, there was a lot of things that I actually connected to. There were a lot of things that I actually connected to, namely both Kremer and Garibaldi's characters and what they bring to the table in this episode. I'll start off with Kremer first. Now, this is in this episode, the whole plot is about how Kremer feels really hurt and rejected. Actually, really just hurt. And some level of rejection for Garibaldi not being there when she probably needed him the most after her father's death. The outcome of how she internalized all that turned into just having this tunnel vision for what she really wanted to pursue in order to feel like she can get some sort of, what's the word? It's not justice.
She seems just really angry. Like
she's very angry, but it's a way to be able to compensate for those emotions, right? So she's trying so hard to make Garibaldi responsible for the anger that she feels. I mean, ultimately, it really is for the loss of her father, but all that grief had no place to go because when probably she needed Garibaldi the most, he wasn't around. Now, because of that, she had this tunnel vision, and every action she takes after in this whole episode is about finding evidence that pins Garibaldi as the suspect. Well, as the, what's the word? Criminal. The criminal.
The bad guy.
The bad guy, yeah. To be able to, be able to pinpoint him as the baddie. So then she engages in she engages in all this confirmation bias. She finds every single evidence that she possibly can to be able to pin him down as the person who is responsible for this explosion. Now think about all the times you have done that, while I think about all the times I've done this. Confirmation bias. It's one of those things that eliminates communication between people because you're so hyper-focused on being able to collect evidence that supports only your stance and your emotions, and very little logic. It's very detrimental when you're in a situation where you're overly emotional about something and you framed your whole thought process around like a certain theory, or basically it's set in stone that this is the outcome. This is how things are, and you try to find evidence that goes against that supports it. I can certainly think of times where I've done that in my life, and it was hard to listen to reason. And as a result of that, there are consequences. You don't communicate with the people that you need to communicate with, and you don't really get the whole picture at all. And then you make inferences based on those faulty based on those faulty information that only supports your emotions. So it really made me think about all the times I've done that because I've been angry or defensive, or I just want to be right. And that is very detrimental to growth, to relationships, and even to healing. Because in Kramer's situation, what was she going to get out of doing that all the way till the very end? If she actually decided on till the end that Garibaldi was responsible for her father's death, well, that he wasn't really around, and blamed him for how she felt, she would hold on to that for the rest of her life. There would be no resolution. Especially since, this is especially important because she would also never understand Garibaldi either. Should I add anything more to that? That's all I got for her. Garibaldi is like a big one.
Okay, I think that she's pretty obvious. I don't think that there's, a lot that you need to dive into with that.
No, the thing about her emotions and her behavior is that it's really so cliche. It's very, you could see that in people often. I think we could say that that's how a lot of people tend to react, especially if they don't have a more sophisticated way of dealing with their emotions. But then a lot of people also do fall prey to confirmation bias because it's hard to see things objectively, until someone else helps point it out, or they're given like a scenario where they're really forced to think differently about something. It's just too bad because no matter what Garibaldi would have said to her, she wouldn't have believed him anyway. She needed evidence. She needed proof. So Garibaldi is definitely the character I'm going to focus on more. Garibaldi. He's having this conversation with Sinclair when Sinclair says, okay, what's the deal? What's going on between you and Kremer? He tells a story. And then he says to him how Frank died, and then that was when he crawled back into the bottle for a very long time. I think that that's something a lot of people can relate to in different ways, not, not literally the bottle. That's certainly something that I can relate to, where I've experienced my own bouts of depression, especially those that were circumstance related, some of them based on poor choices. And when something happens to you and it's really negative and you just really don't know any other way to cope, you crawl back into that very dark space. And it's very oddly comforting because you can sort of deflect responsibility. You can say, oh, woe is me, and this is my life, and this is the hand that was dealt. And you can just say, this is it, right? You don't have to put any more effort. Because effort is hard, especially when you're feeling bad. And effort is hard, especially when you don't feel like things are in your control. The other reason why I think it's oddly comforting too is because it supports your schema. And schema is basically how we understand the world. It's a framework for what we learned as a child, of how we understand ourselves, others, and the world. And we have these beliefs about that. So for example, if all your life you grew up feeling that you were worthless, and a situation put you in a position of where you felt like your self-worth wasn't really important, then it supports it. And you just kind of accept that. It's interesting how it's so much easier to accept the negative things than the positive ones, right? So when it supports how you already see the world, accepting that seems to be so much easier. So it's easier to crawl back into this dark space and stay there for a long time while you're punishing yourself, feeling shame, struggling with guilt. So I understand Garibaldi, because that's easy to do. I understand where he comes from. Here's another thing about addiction, though, as well. Marlett and Gordon, in their relapse prevention therapy, talk about addictions as a learned habit pattern. And basically, we've learned that a certain way of dealing with some situations just is the only way we end up dealing with it. So we have to learn new ways to deal with things, so then we don't fall back into old patterns of continuing to do the same thing that isn't really productive. So I don't really think that Garibaldi really understood or knew how to have other coping skills, right? Or to be able to deal with those emotions in more adaptive ways. I just wanted to throw that out there. And time out. I need to refocus my thought.
Okay.
Am I making any sense?
No, but it's okay. I mean, you are, but
it's not
you
cohesive.
seem a little lost.
I feel very incoherent.
It's coherent enough, but it's not tight.
No, it's not. It's not tight. It doesn't feel good right now.
Yeah, you're a little all over the place, but I mean, you're making sense. It just seems like you're.
I'm not
really
happy with this.
Just do your best. And say so. I mean, you can express it.
Yeah, I'm having a very hard time like collecting my thoughts and making this, coherent. I mean, all the thoughts are like rolling around in there, but I can't seem to like format it in a way. I think it's because I have Evangelion on my mind too. So doing two is definitely, I think, too much.
Well, do you want to do Eva first to get it out of your head? Since B5 doesn't really have a lot of meat to it. It seems like you're preoccupied with Evangelion, so it seems like we should probably.
It feels like they're both kind of in there, but both are non-committal.
Okay.
But
alternating weeks is going to be better.
It is. I just didn't want to I didn't want too much time in between, but at the same time, having that extra time in between is probably going to be beneficial because that's when I do best, I think, with processing the material.
There's no rush. This process is for you. It is not for an audience. It's not on a time constraint. It's for you. So it's better to do it slowly and get the most productive out of it, not to like rush through. Like, why would you try to cram it all in? Like, people will watch it when they watch it or they won't. But this is a project for you and your development and your progress. You're not on anyone's schedule. And I notice you have notes, but you're not really referring to them.
No, because my notes are also like not tight. Okay, I mean, this episode of B5 it's not, in terms of media therapy for myself, these are all situations where I'm very highly aware of in myself. And I don't really have, I guess, unresolved issues that are like presented in this episode. And I can only speak from it from having been there, but also empathizing with the characters because I have been there and I understand where they come from. I mean, with Kremer, it's like, that she's tunnel vision. That she's emotionally focused. That she's, like nothing but confirmation bias is on her path, right? And everything that supports Garibaldi as a suspect, as the criminal behind the explosion, she's all for, because she needs to take her anger out on someone and she needs someone to be responsible for how she feels. And that's Garibaldi, because he wasn't there when she needed him the most. And that's it. And how many times have I done that in my life? Many times. And who are my victims? Everyone. Everyone from my mom, my dad, my brother, Elaine, and a bunch of other strangers, that I don't even know the names of. Because you know what? The anger needs to go somewhere, because I certainly didn't know how to handle it. This was before the days of like me understanding psychology too, as well as before the days where like I decided, okay, well, I need to learn maturity, because that doesn't just only happen with time either. It doesn't only just happen with experience either too. You actually have to like be more active in developing maturity and wisdom. It's too bad. It's like nothing as easy as just kind of laying there and getting an IV drip.
An IV drip of wisdom.
An IV drip of wisdom would be nice. An IV drip of, hey, look, today I want to learn how to like change. Well, no, if you were getting an IV drip, you wouldn't learn. It would just happen right through a drip. That would be nice. But man, like, why is everything so hard? It took years and years for me to like shorten the length of like time that I felt depressed. Because wallowing in depression somehow feels justified, right? Because you're in a state of punishing yourself. And And that state of wanting to punish yourself, you just feel that just feels right, because why would you deserve anything else? Why would you deserve anything else that feels positive? Because you know what? You feel ashamed. You know, you feel like you've made a mistake, and therefore you don't deserve happiness. But the problem with that, right, is that you reinforce the disappointment that other people already feel in you. And when you reinforce other people's disappointment in you, they continue to learn to trust you less and less, and to rely on you less and less, and to become less and less of a positive person in your life. Well, in their life. Why would you want to reinforce that? It was years later when I was beginning to be when I was learning to be a little less self-destructive with my bouts of, depression, and me crawling back into my metaphorical bottle, that I realized that time spent in self-wallowing and pity is too precious. It's so unproductive, and nothing gets accomplished. I thought that, hey, you know what? I need to punish myself. I need to give myself into this, put myself in this perpetual, infinite timeout and feel bad about myself, because that seems just. But what's so just about it, though? That's the irony of it, right? What's just about putting yourself in this place of being constantly negative, useless, unproductive, and even unreliable? What's so just about that place? What makes that place good? What makes that place positive when we inflict our own self-punishment? What good comes out of it? But yet we do it anyway. People do it anyway. They say, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve that. And looking back on it, like all that time that I've done that, while other people were supporting me, but you can't hear it because, hey, guess what? Confirmation bias is a thing, right? And you can't hear the things that go against what you think. You can only hear the things that support how you feel at that moment. And that in and of itself is powerful, but in such a destructive way. You shut everything out and nothing comes to you. Nothing reaches you. So it wasn't until, actually it was during a conversation with you, Elaine, where I realized, this is like years ago, where I realized that keeping myself in this place had no value. It doesn't have any value. What meaningful thing are you engaged in? Okay, if you think that you're that worthless, then why not work towards something that's going to make you feel like you have worth? But you see, that's really hard to do, right? Because again, you have the schema that you developed as a child. As a child, you learn about yourself based on what the world teaches you about who you are. The world teaches you this, right? Including all the relationships that were in your life teaches you this. The world teaches you about other people. Other people show you, whether or not they're trustworthy, whether or not they're reliable, whether or not they're going to hurt you. And then you learn about the world. Is this a safe place to live in or not? You formulate your whole life around these schemas that you learn as a child. And now the things that you learn as a child, it's so hard to undo as you grow older, and especially if you've been practicing and believing in this your entire life, to change everything you thought about your life is almost impossible. It feels impossible, because that means you'd have to change every thought that you thought. And you'd have to go back and think of all the mistakes you've made and all the time wasted and all the things that you felt about yourself that you shouldn't have, that you didn't have to. But the world taught you these things, and so you're stuck there, right? The most important thing, though, is that wallowing in a place of negativity and despair is not productive. It doesn't take you any further. It doesn't give you strength. And it becomes your own ball and chain. And you stay in this one place without growth, without movement, without positivity. And then you have to ultimately ask this question: is that what your life is supposed to be like? The one life that you're given to live now, is that how you're supposed to live your life? Is that what life was meant to be? And if so, who actually dictated that? For me to challenge my own schemas, my own worldview, actually, like my own personal schemas are these. As a young child, I believed, I was taught actually through all my experiences, that I was unlovable. My self-esteem and my self-worth were compromised because of that. And that was a result of, my upbringing. Because as children, you rely on your parents to be the ones that you begin to learn to trust first, right? If you don't have that as a child, then you develop the schema that the people who are supposed to love you and who are closest to you, you can't trust. You can't trust for safety, and you can't rely on them to give you what you need as a developing child. And then you go out into the world and you only find things in the world that support how you felt about yourself, and how the people that you're supposed to trust the most didn't trust you. And so you find that the world doesn't do that too, but you only pick and choose those things because that supporting evidence is so strong. And everything else, all the other stuff that doesn't support how you feel about yourself, gets tossed out the door. It doesn't even become recognized. I mean, maybe for some people it becomes, a glimmer of a thought. Oh, maybe I may have some self-worth. Oh, this person, gave me a compliment. You know what? They're just being nice. You come up with reasons not to believe it. That sucks. That absolutely sucks, right? So the thing that I most definitely want to say is, don't spend time in self-wallowing, pity, and self-punishment. The world is already hard enough. The world already punishes you enough because life is always a series of challenges. It's not worth it. You need all that energy to get through your challenges. Now, to connect this to the other thing that Garibaldi experiences, right? When we believe that we are such crappy people, and we have these coping mechanisms that are very dark and unproductive. But we also don't ask for help. I had a very hard time asking for help. And that's also because it supports the schema. Well, I don't deserve to get help from other people. Why? Because I'm not worthy. And a lot of people don't ask for help for various reasons. It's about self-worth. It's about pride. It's about ego. You don't want to impose on anyone. For me, it was important that like I could show the world because like I was taught that like my self-worth isn't really important. Like my worth isn't important, right? Because I was taught as a young child that my worth wasn't important. Like getting the help from other people is not something I was worthy of. But then like what I also did was I felt like I needed to constantly prove myself. That if I said I did this on my own, then maybe they can acknowledge me. Maybe then they would actually say, well, wow, you did it on your own. You had all this strength. I wanted to prove to the world, I wanted to prove to people that I was able to do things without the help of other people. But you know what though? There's a price to that. There is, in my situation, an irreversible price to that actually. I worked full-time, third shift. I did my internships, my practicums, the required coursework. I went to school full-time for both my master's program and the doctoral program. I hardly slept, and I ultimately burned myself out. Burnout is an interesting thing. It's not like you can take a 1-week vacation from everything that you're currently doing, and then you come back refreshed. It doesn't actually work that way. Burnout becomes so ingrained in your physiology, it can't be undone with a week's worth of vacation. In fact, when you come back from vacation, you feel like you need more time off because that 1 week wasn't enough to give you that reprieve from all the stress that you were feeling. Ultimately, well, here's the other thing. I refused to take out student loans, and that was a stubbornness as well. I mean, that's a form of asking for help too, right? Taking out a student loan. I mean, ultimately that ended up with, me developing an autoimmune disorder. And it developed over time, insidiously. The other thing about asking help is this, asking for help. You would think that asking for help means that you're imposing on someone else's time and their effort. But with the way the world is and how disconnected people feel, because we don't even want to connect to other people for many different things. I've learned that asking for help from other people gives other people so much meaning too. It gives them a sense of feeling helpful. it gives them meaning in their life. It gives them a sense of importance that if it wasn't for them, your life is harder. And they know that they get the sense that like it's that they were somehow able to make your life a little bit easier because of their presence and their effort. And because they also care. And by asking for help, you're giving them the opportunity for them to be able to be meaningful to you, which then gives them meaning. That was something I didn't recognize for the longest time. And that's also very, very important to keep in mind. So asking for help isn't this sort of inherently selfish thing. It's not. Asking for help shows you that you are valued, but also it gives other people meaning. Yep. Something I also learned along the way because I was very stubborn. I think the thing that gives me consolation, and perhaps it could give other people consolation, is that because you are inherently human, and because it's impossible to learn everything you can possibly learn about living life without making any mistakes, that you accept these mistakes as a part of your life. It's a part of being human, and it's inevitable. The quality and number of mistakes you can sort of, that can change. Hopefully it'll become less and less mistakes and better quality mistakes? Less quality mistakes? I don't know.
Better quality mistakes.
Yeah. You don't want these mistakes to be, as detrimental, right? And hopefully that'll come with like learning wisdom, from your wisdom IV drip. But even in those situations, we're all human. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has mistakes they've made that they feel guilty of. Everyone feels shame. To think that no one else does would be very naive. But knowing that oddly gives me consolation, even though it shouldn't, only because you don't want to believe that you don't want to like think about other people's suffering as well. But it gives me consolation in the fact that like we're all connected in that way as being human. So it's okay. It's okay. You make mistakes, and those are also the times where you're supposed to call out for help. Ask for help. And that's okay. It's 1000% okay. It's kind of important who you ask for help from, though. Hopefully whoever you ask for help from isn't going to shame you even more than the shame that you already feel. So that's important. So hopefully everyone has people they trust that they can reach out for help from. Yeah. So initially I thought that this episode wasn't going to offer me much. But really sitting with the themes that were presented here took me down my timeline and made me reflect on a lot of things that I didn't know back then, things I learned along the way, and things I know now.
Initially,
yes,
when you watched the episode, you were just like, it doesn't have anything to do with me. I can't relate to this. I can't relate to any of the characters. This doesn't have anything to do with me. But in fact, and even I just watched you do this, which is going to be really fascinating for other people to watch. Once you kind of got over this idea of having notes and trying to talk about it in sort of a clinical way, and you just threw it, and you just started talking, all of these things came out of you. All of this very, like, and you said everything perfectly. You had no ums, you had no confusion, you had no nothing. Once you let your emotions come into it, everything came out of you.
So every time I sit in front of this camera to write, to do this project, like I feel like, and this is just sort of my own preconceived expectations, that I need to have like a way to start this, or have like a format, or figure out how to say how to say all the things I want to say in a cohesive manner. And I always don't feel like prepared. I'm still sort of stuck on the fact that I'm sitting in front of like a camera, and this is being filmed, and this is this is gonna go out to the public for public viewing. And I keep thinking to myself, it needs like a format, right? Like I need a table of contents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to come out of that. But then it's only when I let my guard down, and that's the hardest part of it. To let your guard down and to be able to speak more freely. I think sometimes I don't really trust myself either. I don't have the kind of, I wouldn't say confidence necessarily, but it's sort of like that trust that something's gonna flip on within me once I start talking about a topic. I don't fully trust that yet, even though now, like in the past couple of episodes, that's been evident, especially when I start talking free form. I mean, it's my own life I'm talking about, right? So how couldn't I speak of that in free form, and why couldn't I trust that? Yeah, it's these preconceived expectations that I just can't shake off. I can't quite shake off. So when I hit on a topic and I kind of like let myself go and forget that I'm actually sitting in front of a camera, even though it's staring at me, and I can sort of get in the zone, then I could see it unfold. I suppose this is what it's like to lay down on Freud's couch and do psychoanalysis, where it becomes like this free association of all your thoughts, just to like let it go. I think it's kind of like that. It only takes shape once I become more connected to my feelings. And that takes a bit of time, knowing that this is being recorded. It's not so hard when when we're having natural conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still something I'm trying to work on, but it's not as easy. It's not as easy. But I think the variable is the fact that I'm being filmed.
Sure.
Here's the other struggle. For the very longest time, especially when I was going through training, and if you look at the ethics codes for psychologists, my God, are there so many restrictions. And there's always this question as to how much of yourself do you share with other people? How much of yourself do you share with clients? In the extreme traditional psychoanalysis, the answer to that is absolutely none. It's an absolute zero. And even a smirk during a therapy session would be considered an influential factor that could affect the client's therapeutic process. So here I am, you know, sharing my life experiences and the things that I go through. And honestly, I actually still struggle with that. How much of myself do I, you know, still share? I mean, years ago, I had a friend who was a psychologist at the time tell me to stay off the web. And that still resonates in my mind. I mean, things have drastically changed since, you know, a decade ago, but now you see a lot of therapists out there and doing things, but they're not really quite doing their own media therapy process. So it's something that still lingers in my mind. Like, how much can I share? Yeah, all day yesterday thinking about, like, sitting yet again to film this. There's always a sense of nervousness and uneasiness I feel because of that. And I think that also makes me hold back a little bit too. But, you know, while other people may not be as readily readily what? While other people may not be as readily, may be reluctant to share their experiences, I actually think that it's important to share your experiences with other people so then they have a frame of reference as to how to not make those same mistakes. Use it as some sort of a guide. So then you have better quality mistakes.
The great thing about social media and the awful thing is that social media also presents an illusion that people have these great lives, right? And, you know, but then there's also the social media very authentic people who show life how it is. And those people tend to be the ones that people will resonate with. Being able to see the reality of someone else's hardships and also knowing that other people are struggling helps you in your struggles. It's not relishing in someone else's suffering. Well, for some people it is, but for other people it's just like, hey, you know, I'm not alone in this. There's other people going through this.
That's what I remind myself as I prep to be in front of the camera week after week. You know, my life, and nor should anyone else's lives, be something that someone else has the right to judge. It's not. There's no place for judgment. People make mistakes. People have different circumstances that place them where they are. But what's more important is, you know, as Sinclair said, you know, like, okay, hold on, I gotta refer to my notes.
I thought you were about to transition into something genius, and you have to look at your notes.
It's what Sinclair says. He says, you know, but you crawled back out again and did the job, and that's what counts. That's always what counts. No matter how many times you fall, right? You rise 8. That's always what counts. And you know what? Then eventually, the mistakes that you've collected along your life, the mistakes that you collected in your life, it becomes a part of history. And with time, it just becomes more distant. And you don't need to connect with that anymore. It just, you could add it to, like, you know, your character building or a learning lesson. Learning lesson.
Lesson learning.
Lesson learned. So for everyone out there, thanks for being human. That means you understood me as much as I understand you. And that will not change. And keep on watching media as if it's written for you. It'll take you places, and you'll learn a lot. I certainly am. All right, thanks everyone for watching, and thanks again for resubscribing. That's very cool. Really, really cool.
Watching you shift gears is really weird. Like,
it is.
You struggle, and then you're just like, fuck this, right? And
yeah.
And you said that whole thing about Kremer completely without pausing, without breathing, and you put it together, everything that you've been trying to say, you summed it up so succinctly.
I need like a prompt from you, right?
What am I gonna say?
That was
Makes
it.
Sense.
That was it. That's all it took. And it's like, wait a minute, because it's like in natural conversation, it's so much easier. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier, but just trying to do this as a monologue. I mean, I could do.
It sounded like it came from you, like it was finally your opinion. Here's what I think of Kremer, right? Like it just came out.
I know, and every week.
Let that go. Like just say what you.
I tried.
I know.
I tried.
But you're like, and well, she had like you're trying to be so professional, and you're trying to be.
I tried.
Just let it come out. Just be whatever.
Next time you should play the Frozen song. Jenny, here's a reminder. Let it go. Let it go.
All the beginnings of your videos are the same. They're always a little tough. It's when you finally get into it. But I think it's also, like you said, the camera and everything, like as soon as you sit down, it's like, okay, you're on. And it's like that presentation, energy. But you have to kind of just...
I can't quite get there. It's
gonna take a while.
It needs to like just I can't just get myself there.
I know. You're getting there though. You're getting more comfortable, but just let it go. Just say what you feel.
I mean, the second half felt so much better. It felt like my last one, right?
Yeah. I think also when you're looking for things to discuss as opposed to just feeling things to discuss.
It's not easy. It's not easy to like just let that switch flip.
Mm-hmm. I know, but you're getting there.